My friends, Sinbad began, his voice rich with the memory of distant lands and past perils. After my first voyage, I returned to Baghdad a wealthy man. I had faced the terrors of the sea, survived the back of a giant whale, and returned with a fortune. I fully intended to spend the rest of my days in peace, enjoying the fruits of my labor in this magnificent city. I surrounded myself with comforts, hosted lavish banquets, and sought the company of scholars and poets. For a time, this indolent life was enough. Yet it was not long before a familiar restlessness began to stir within me. The quiet life, pleasant as it was, began to feel like a cage. The call of the open ocean, the thrill of the unknown, the challenge of trade in distant markets. These things revived my inclination to travel with a force I could not ignore. My heart yearned once more for the salty air and the endless horizon. Yielding to this impulse, I decided to set out again. I used a portion of my wealth to purchase a large and varied stock of goods suitable for commerce in the East: fine silks, exquisite glassware, aromatic spices, and beautifully crafted metalwork. I sought out merchants of known probity and experience, men whose word was their bond, to join me in this new venture. Together, we secured passage on a large, sturdy ship, newly caulked and rigged, with a seasoned captain and a capable crew. After settling our affairs and recommending ourselves to the protection of Almighty God, we set sail from Basra, heading down the Tigris and out into the vast expanse of the Persian Gulf. The winds were favorable, and our spirits were high as we watched the coast of our homeland recede from view. For many weeks, our voyage was prosperous and uneventful. We traded from island to island, calling at busy ports and isolated trading posts. Everywhere we went, we exchanged our commodities with great profit, our cargo holds emptying of Baghdad's treasures and filling with the exotic riches of the Indies. My companions and I grew wealthier with each stop, and the thrill of successful commerce filled our days. One bright, clear day, with a gentle breeze filling our sails, we sighted a large, lush island rising from the turquoise sea. It appeared to be an uninhabited paradise. As we drew closer, we saw that it was covered with a dense forest of various fruit trees, their branches heavy with ripe, colorful produce. We sailed along the coast, but could see no sign of man or animal, no smoke from fires, no huts, not even the footprints of wild beasts on the sandy shores. The captain, sensing our eagerness to stretch our legs and taste the fresh fruits, brought the ship to anchor in a calm, sheltered bay. He gave permission for those who wished to go ashore, warning us only to be mindful of the time and not to wander too far. I was among the first to leap into the ship's boat. We landed on a pristine beach of white sand and immediately dispersed into the island's interior, like children released from school. The air was wonderfully fresh and fragrant with the scent of blossoms and ripe fruit. Lush meadows stretched out before us, watered by crystal clear streams that meandered down from the forested hills. While some of my companions diverted themselves with gathering colorful wildflowers that grew in profusion, and others busied themselves with picking the luscious fruits that hung within easy reach, I felt a desire for quiet contemplation. I had brought with me a leather flask of excellent wine and a parcel of choice provisions from the ship's stores, some cured meats, hardtack biscuits, and dried dates. I wandered away from the main group, following the course of a babbling brook until I found an idyllic spot. It was a small, grassy clearing betwixt two enormously high and ancient trees, their spreading branches interlacing overhead to form a thick, cool shade that completely blocked out the midday sun. The soft murmuring of the stream and the gentle rustling of the leaves created a peaceful atmosphere. I sat down upon the soft grass and made a hearty meal, enjoying the solitude and the beauty of my surroundings. The wine was cool and refreshing, and the food satisfied my hunger. Afterward, lulled by the tranquil sounds of nature and perhaps a little drowsy from the wine, a great heaviness came over my eyelids. I leaned back against the trunk of one of the great trees and allowed myself to drift into a deep and dreamless sleep. I cannot tell how long I slept. It felt like mere moments, but it must have been hours. When I finally awoke, the light had changed. The sun was lower in the sky, casting long, stretching shadows across the meadows. A sudden, cold dread washed over me even before I fully grasped my situation. I sprang to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest, and ran out of the grove to the edge of the beach. My worst fears were realized. I looked around me frantically, but I could not see one of the merchants who had landed with me. The beach was deserted. I scanned the bay where we had anchored. The ship was gone. I rubbed my eyes, hoping it was a nightmare, but the cruel reality remained. I strained my gaze towards the horizon, and there, barely visible in the far distance, I perceived the ship under full sail, a tiny white speck against the darkening blue of the sea. The wind must have changed suddenly, or perhaps the captain, fearing an approaching storm or impatient with our delay, had ordered an immediate departure. Whatever the reason, they had sailed without me, and I lost sight of the vessel in a short time as it disappeared over the curvature of the earth. In this sad and terrible condition, abandoned and alone on a deserted island, I was ready to die with grief. A wave of despair crashed over me, so powerful that my knees buckled. I cried out in agony, my voice echoing uselessly in the empty landscape. I tore at my clothes and threw myself upon the ground, burying my face in the sand, where I lay for some time in a stupor of despair, wishing for death to end my misery. I upbraided myself 100 times for my folly. Why was I not content with the produce of my first voyage? Why did I leave the safety and comfort of Baghdad, where I had everything a man could desire? That first fortune might have sufficed me all my life, allowing me to live in honor and ease. But greed and restlessness had driven me forth again, and now I was paying the ultimate price. But all this self-reproach was in vain. My repentance came too late to save me. At last, when the first paroxysm of grief had passed, I sat up. The instinct for survival, strong even in the depths of despair, began to assert itself. I resigned myself to the will of Almighty God, knowing that nothing happens but by His decree. Not knowing what to do next, but realizing I could not stay on the beach forever, I decided to gain a vantage point. I chose a lofty tree, one of the tallest near the shore, and began to climb. It was a difficult and exhausting ascent, but fear gave me strength. When I finally reached the top, I perched myself on a sturdy branch and looked about on all sides, straining my eyes to see if I could discover anything that could give me hopes. A sign of habitation, a column of smoke, perhaps another ship. When I gazed toward the sea, I saw nothing but the endless expanse of sky and water, merging in the distance in a hazy line. The emptiness was profound and terrifying. But then, turning and looking over the land towards the center of the island, I beheld something white standing out against the green of the forest. It was far away, and from my perch I could not make out its nature. Curiosity flickered to life within me, pushing back the despair. Coming down from the tree with renewed energy, I gathered up what little provision I had left in my parcel, slung my wine flask over my shoulder, and went toward the mysterious white object. The distance was so great that it took me several hours of arduous walking through thick undergrowth and across rough terrain before I could distinguish what it was. As I finally approached it, the sheer scale of the thing took my breath away. I thought it to be a white dome of a prodigious height and extent, rising like a small hill from the forest floor. When I came right up to it, I reached out and touched its surface. It felt cool, incredibly smooth and hard like polished marble or alabaster, but with a strange organic texture. I walked around its entire circumference to see if it was open on any side, perhaps a temple or a strange dwelling, but I saw that it was a continuous, unbroken surface, with no door, no window, no crack or crevice. There was no possibility of climbing up to the top, as it was so smooth and spherical that one would simply slide off. I paced around it and estimated it was at least 50 paces round. What could such an immense, flawless structure be? By this time, the sun was about to set and the shadows in the forest were deepening. Suddenly, and without warning, the sky above me became as dark as if it had been covered with a thick, thunderous cloud. The light was blotted out in an instant. I was much astonished at this sudden darkness on a clear evening, but my astonishment turned to abject terror when I looked up to discover its cause. It was occasioned by a bird of a monstrous, unbelievable size that came flying toward me from the mountains. Its wingspan was so vast it seemed to block out the heavens themselves, and the sound of its approach was like the rushing of a mighty wind. In a flash of terrifying clarity, I remembered that I had often heard old mariners in the port of Basra speak of a miraculous and fearsome bird called the roc. They said it was a creature of immense strength, capable of carrying off an elephant in its talons to feed its young. Until that moment, I had always considered these tales to be mere sailors' fables, exaggerations born of long, lonely nights at sea. But now, faced with the reality, I conceived that the great white dome which I so much admired must be its egg. As I perceived the rock coming lower and lower, circling its nest, panic seized me. Where could I hide from such a creature? There were no caves, no thickets dense enough to conceal me. In my desperation, an idea, wild and dangerous, formed in my mind. It was a chance, perhaps the only chance I would ever have of escaping this prison of an island. I crept close to the egg, pressing myself against its smooth surface, shivering with fear. The rock landed with an earth-shaking thud, folding its immense wings. It settled itself over the egg to brood, its massive body towering over me like a feathered mountain. In the deepening twilight, I found myself positioned right in front of one of the bird's legs. It was covered in thick, scaly skin and was as big around as the trunk of a large, ancient tree. Working quickly and quietly, trying to still the trembling of my hands, I unwound the long linen cloth of my turban. I looped it around the bird's enormous leg and then around my own waist, tying myself strongly to it with several intricate knots. I prayed that the creature would not notice the extra weight or the strange attachment. My hope, born of utter desperation, was that the next morning, when the bird flew off to hunt, she would carry me with her out of this desert island, perhaps to a land inhabited by men. After having passed the night in this uncomfortable and terrifying condition, unable to sleep for fear that the bird might move and crush me, or that I might fall if the knot slipped, the first gray light of dawn finally appeared. The rock stirred, stretched its mighty wings with a sound like cracking timber, and then, with a powerful thrust of its legs, launched itself into the air. She rose higher and higher, carrying me up with her. The island below shrank rapidly until it looked no bigger than a pebble in a pond. She flew so swiftly and at such an incredible altitude that I could not discern the earth below. The world became a blur of greens and blues. The rush of wind was deafening, and the sheer terror of my situation, dangling thousands of feet in the air, caused me to lose my senses. I fainted away, dangling limply from the bird's leg. I do not know how long we flew, but I was jarred back to consciousness when the rock began to descend. She dropped from the sky with such astonishing rapidity that I felt my stomach lurch into my throat and I nearly fainted again. When I felt solid ground beneath my feet once more, I realized we had landed. The rock had set down in a deep valley. With fingers that were numb and shaking uncontrollably, I speedily untied the knots of my turban, freeing myself from the massive leg. I had scarcely done so and rolled away to hide behind a large rock when the rock, having spotted her prey, lunged forward. She took up a serpent of a monstrous length in her bill, a creature so huge I would have thought it a dragon, and with a powerful beat of her wings flew away towards the mountain peaks, leaving me behind in the valley. I stood up and looked around, my heart sinking. The spot where she left me was a deep, narrow chasm, encompassed on all sides by towering precipitous mountains. Their rugged peaks seemed to reach above the clouds, and their sides were so sheer and steep, presenting smooth faces of rock without any handholds or footholds, that there was absolutely no possibility of climbing out. This was a new and terrible perplexity. When I compared this place with the desert island from which the rock had brought me, I found that I had gained nothing by the change. Indeed, my situation seemed even more hopeless. At least on the island, there were fruits and water, and the open sea offered a faint hope of a passing ship. Here, I was trapped in a prison of stone, with no apparent source of food or water and no way out. As I walked dejectedly through this valley, wondering if this was to be my grave, I perceived something glittering on the ground. I bent down and saw that the soil was strewed with diamonds. They were everywhere, sparkling in the morning light. Some of them were of a surprising bigness, larger and more brilliant than any I had ever seen in the treasuries of kings. For a moment, the merchant in me was awakened. I took pleasure in looking upon them, imagining the unimaginable wealth they represented. I picked up several of the finest stones, marveling at their perfection. But this satisfaction was surely diminished and then completely extinguished by what I saw next. At a distance, moving among the rocks at the far end of the valley, I saw such objects as greatly filled me with horror, namely, a great number of serpents, so monstrous in size and hideous in aspect that the least of them was capable of swallowing an elephant whole. Their scales shimmered with a deadly, iridescent sheen, and their forked tongues flickered in the air, tasting for prey. I realized with a shudder that these were the inhabitants of the valley. They retired in the daytime to their dark dens and deep caves in the mountainsides. where they hid themselves from the rock, their only natural enemy. They came out only in the night to hunt, and the valley floor would then be swarming with them. The realization of my deadly peril drove all thoughts of wealth from my mind. I spent the rest of the day in walking about in the valley in a state of extreme agitation, resting myself at times in such places as I thought most convenient and defensible, always keeping a wary eye on the cave entrances. When night came on, the air grew chill and the valley was plunged into deep shadow. I heard the terrifying sibilant sounds of the great serpents beginning to emerge from their lairs. Desperate for shelter, I searched until I found a small, shallow cave near the base of the cliff. I went into it, hoping I might repose in some safety. I secured the entrance with a great, heavy stone, which I managed to roll in front of the opening with all my strength. It was large enough to preserve me from the serpents, but I was careful not to close the entrance so far as to exclude the light and air completely, fearing suffocation. I sat in the darkness of my small refuge, my heart pounding. I supped sparingly on part of the remaining provisions I still carried in my parcel, though fear had taken away my appetite. Outside, the sounds of the night intensified. The serpents began hissing round my cave, their great bodies scraping against the rocks. The noise was so frightful, so close, and put me into such extreme fear that I could not close my eyes. I sat awake the entire night, sword in hand, praying that the stone would hold. When day finally appeared, to my immense relief, the sounds died away as the serpents retired to their dens to escape the light and the threat of the rock. I pushed the stone aside just enough to squeeze through and came out of the cave, trembling in every limb from the terrors of the night. I walked out into the valley again. I can justly say that I walked upon a carpet of diamonds, a king's ransom beneath my crude sandals, without feeling any inclination to touch them. What use was wealth to a man about to die a horrific death? My only thought was escape. At last, exhausted and overwhelmed by lack of sleep and constant fear, I sat down upon a rock. Notwithstanding my apprehensions, nature could not be denied. Not having closed my eyes during the whole night, a profound weariness overtook me. After having eaten a little more of my provision to sustain my fading strength, I leaned back and fell into a fitful, uneasy sleep. But I had scarcely shut my eyes, it seemed, when something that fell by me with a great wet noise awaked me with a start. I sprang to my feet, looking around wildly. It was a large piece of raw, bloody meat, apparently freshly slaughtered, that had landed just a few feet from where I had been sleeping. Before I could comprehend this strange occurrence, at the same time I saw several other similar pieces of meat fall down from the rocks in different places around the valley floor. They landed with sickening thuds, scattering the diamonds in the dust. And then, a sudden realization struck me like a thunderbolt. I had always regarded as fabulous stories what I had heard sailors and others relate of the famous Valley of Diamonds, and of the cunning stratagems employed by merchants to obtain jewels from thence. But now, seeing the raw meat falling from the sky, I found that they had stated nothing but the absolute truth. For the fact is, as the legends say, that this valley is so inaccessible that no man can enter it and return alive. The merchants, therefore, come to the neighborhood of this valley at the time of year when the great eagles that nest in the surrounding mountains have young ones. These merchants, standing on the high precipices above, slaughter sheep and oxen, cut them into great joints, and throw these large bloody pieces of meat down into the valley. The diamonds that strew the valley floor, being sharp and numerous, stick to the raw flesh when it falls upon them. The eagles, which are stronger and fiercer in this country than anywhere else, are attracted by the scent of the blood. They swoop down into the valley, pounce with great force upon those pieces of meat, and carry them up to their nests on the inaccessible rocks to feed their hungry young. The merchants, who have been watching from their vantage points, then run to the nests as fast as they can. They drive off the eagles by their shouts and by clattering stones together, and then they take away the diamonds that they find sticking to the meat. Until I perceived this device in action, I had concluded it to be absolutely impossible for me to leave this abyss, which I regarded as my certain grave. But now, seeing the eagles flying down to retrieve the meat, a ray of hope, however desperate, pierced the gloom of my despair. I changed my opinion and began to think with feverish intensity upon the means of my deliverance using this very stratagem. Time was short, the eagles would soon be arriving in numbers. I began to act with speed and purpose. First, I ran about and collected the largest and most perfect diamonds I could find. I picked them out of the sand and pried them from the rock crevices, filling the stout leather bag in which I used to carry my provisions until it was heavy with incalculable wealth. Then I selected the largest and freshest of the pieces of meat that had fallen near me. It was a massive joint of beef, raw and bloody. I took off my turban once more, and using its long cloth, I tied the piece of meat closely and securely to my chest and stomach, making sure the ropes were firm. Then, holding the meat fast to my body, I went to a clear space in the valley and laid myself flat upon the ground with my face downward, the leather bag of diamonds being made fast to my girdle beneath me, so it would not be in the way. I lay there, presenting my back, covered by the raw meat to the sky, and waited, my heart pounding against the earth. I had scarcely placed myself in this posture when the eagles came. I heard the rushing of their wings and their shrill cries as they descended into the valley. Each of them seized a piece of meat in its powerful talons and flew off. One of the strongest and largest eagles, seeing the great piece of meat upon my back, swooped down. I felt the wind of its approach, then the sharp, sudden grip of its claws as they sank into the raw flesh tied to my back. It paused for a moment, gathering its strength, and then, with a mighty flapping of its wings, it took me up along with the piece of meat to which I was fastened. I was lifted from the ground and carried up, out of the shadowy valley and into the bright sunlight. The eagle carried me, dangling helplessly, all the way to its nest located on a high, craggy pinnacle of the mountain. The moment I was dropped into the large, stick-built nest, the merchants who had been waiting and watching on the nearby cliffs immediately began their shouting and hullabaloo to frighten the eagles away. They threw stones and beat upon brass basins, making a deafening noise. The eagle that had carried me, alarmed by the commotion, took flight, abandoning its prize. As soon as it was gone, one of the merchants, more agile than the rest, climbed down to the nest where I was. He was much alarmed when he saw a living man lying in the nest instead of just a piece of meat. He stopped short, staring at me with eyes wide with astonishment and fear, perhaps thinking I was some spirit of the mountain. But recovering himself and seeing I was but a man, his surprise turned to anger. Instead of inquiring how I came thither or offering help, he began to quarrel with me in a rough, accusing tone. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What are you doing here, stealing my goods? These diamonds are mine by right of my labor." I sat up, untying the meat from my chest, and addressed him calmly. "Do not be angry, my friend. You will treat me with more civility when you know me better and hear my story. Do not be uneasy about your profits. I am no thief. I have diamonds enough in this bag for you and myself, more than all the other merchants together could gather in a month. Whatever they have obtained, they owe to mere chance and the luck of the fall, but I selected for myself in the bottom of the valley the very best and largest stones, which you see here." I opened the leather bag and poured out a shimmering cascade of jewels onto the floor of the nest. The merchant's eyes almost started from his head at the sight of such wealth. I had scarcely done speaking and showing the diamonds when the other merchants, hearing our voices, came crowding about us, climbing down to the nest. They were much astonished to see me, a stranger in such a place, but they were much more surprised and filled with wonder when I told them my incredible story of the shipwreck, the rock, the Valley of Serpents, and my desperate escape. They were good men, traders like myself, and their initial suspicion turned to admiration for my courage and resourcefulness. They conducted me from the nest to their encampment, which was situated on a high plateau nearby. There, having opened my bag again in the presence of all, they were surprised at the largeness and purity of my diamonds, and confessed that in all the courts of the kings which they had visited, they had never seen any jewels of such size and perfection. I felt a deep sense of gratitude to the merchant whose meat had been the means of my rescue. I turned to him and said, "Sir, I pray you, take as many of these diamonds for your share as you please. You have saved my life, and half my fortune is yours by right." But the honest merchant would not hear of it. He contented himself with picking out just one diamond, and that by no means the largest of the heap. When I pressed him to take more, he smiled and said, "No, my friend, I am very well satisfied with this one. It is valuable enough to make me a rich man, to save me the trouble of making any more dangerous voyages, and will raise as great a fortune as I desire for myself and my children." I spent the night with the merchants in their camp, enjoying their company and their food, which tasted like the finest banquet after my days of privation. I related my story a second time, more fully, for the satisfaction of those who had not heard it the first time. As I lay under the stars that night, safe at last, I could not moderate my joy when I found myself delivered from the terrible dangers I had mentioned. I thought myself in a dream and could scarcely believe myself out of danger, touching the ground periodically to assure myself it was real. The merchants had thrown their pieces of meat into the valley for several days, and now, each of them being satisfied with the diamonds that had fallen to his lot, they prepared to depart. We left the place the next morning and traveled for many days across a rugged landscape near high mountains where there were reports of serpents of a prodigious length, but by the grace of God, we had the good fortune to escape them and see none. After a long and arduous overland journey, we arrived at the first seaport town. Here, I was able to sell a few of my smaller diamonds to local jewelers, obtaining gold and silver to pay for my passage and buy new clothes and necessities. We took shipping at this port and began our sea voyage home. On our way, we touched at the Isle of Roja, a place famous for the camphor trees that grow there. This tree is so large and its branches so thick and spreading that 100 men may easily sit under its shade with room to spare. The inhabitants showed me how the camphor is obtained. The juice of which the camphor is made exudes from a hole bored in the upper part of the trunk. It is received in a large vessel, where it thickens to a consistency like wax and becomes what we call camphor. After the juice is thus all drawn out, the great tree withers and dies. In this same island is also found a wondrous beast called the rhinoceros, an animal less than the elephant in height but larger than the buffalo in bulk. It has a single massive horn upon its nose, about a cubit in length. This horn is solid bone and cleft through the middle from base to tip. The rhinoceros is a fearsome creature and the mortal enemy of the elephant. It fights with the elephant, running its horn into the elephant's belly and then carries him off, impaled upon its head. But the blood and the fat of the dead elephant run down into the rhinoceros's eyes, making him blind and helpless. He soon falls to the ground, and then, strange to relate, the monstrous roc comes and carries them both away in her claws for food for her young ones. I saw many other strange and wonderful things during our voyage, but I will not weary you with their description. In this island of Roja, I exchanged some more of my diamonds for valuable merchandise of the region. From hence we went to other ports, trading and bartering as we went. At last, having touched at several trading towns of the continent, we landed safely at Basra. From Basra, I proceeded by caravan to my beloved Baghdad. There, I was reunited with my family and friends, who had given me up for dead. I immediately gave large presents to the poor, building mosques and caravanserais, and distributing alms liberally in gratitude to God for my deliverance. I sold the remainder of my diamonds for immense sums of money, becoming far richer than I had ever been before. And so, I have lived honorably and comfortably ever since upon the vast riches I had gained with so much fatigue and terror, content now to let others seek their fortunes on the treacherous seas. Thus Sinbad ended the relation of his second voyage. The company sat in stunned silence for a moment, contemplating the wonders and terrors he had described. Sinbad then turned to the porter, Hindbad, whose eyes were wide with amazement. He motioned to his treasurer, who brought forward another purse heavy with gold. Sinbad handed it to the porter, saying, "Take this, my friend, as a token of my friendship and as compensation for your time. Go home to your family and come again tomorrow at the same hour. You shall dine with me, and I will relate to you the account of my third voyage, which was even more perilous and extraordinary than the two you have already heard." Hindbad thanked him profusely, his heart filled with gratitude and wonder, and departed eager for the next day's tale.